Again, people, man, this is a great article, and it's not very popular. Hell, I don't even know if YouTube will leave it up because they delete anything that doesn't push the put white cops in jail and Black Lives Matter. So I did one video on this where I showed a knee on a guy's back and they removed it. And I was trying to say in an educational, just like this video is going to be educational. It's going to give you scientific and data that will make a reasonable person reach a conclusion that is reasonable. And the media doesn't like that. They like to charge you with emotions. And YouTube likes to only show you emotional videos to get the outcome they want. So they block anything that will cause you to be a critical thinking, to where you don't need YouTube to tell you what to listen. So this is on medium.com. They did a really great job on this article. So if you want to go read the whole article, I'm going to be skipping around to points that I think are kind of relevant. But the whole article, this is probably the best freaking news article I've read in probably 20 years. They put sources, they put links, they cover both sides. They're not pushing one side or the other. They're simply saying why Derek Chauvin may get off his murder charge. Now, will he get off his manslaughter? I don't know. The more facts come out about this, the more I'm thinking he probably should have never been charged. But that's not popular. And that doesn't fit the agenda. And you can't even say it. You can't even think it. Because if they think it, they'll call you a racist. But saying it, oh my God, you just proved that you're evil. So I'm going to go through this article and give you my opinion as a cop testifying, working murders, working law enforcement, why I said a long time ago they're going to have a hard time convicting this guy. So here we go. The video was horrific. Anytime someone dies, I mean, look, nobody likes to see people killed. I mean, unless it's maybe, if you say a child molester, then maybe people be like, okay, I'm okay if he's killed. I mean, there's certain people that people are okay with. But seeing innocent people or somebody that isn't doing what we normally think behavior is, you should be killed for, that's what we're talking about. Okay, rush to condemn the aggressive force on George Floyd. They ignored crucial information. I agree. He goes over some 6 critical pieces of information that he thinks are pertinent here. George Floyd was experiencing cardio issues, psychological issues, minutes before they put him on the ground and before they put the knee on the neck. Now, I know immediately everybody's going to come here who have these preconceived and they only want confirmation bias. George Floyd should have died. He put his knee on, that's why he died. Just listen to the information and try to think, people. I mean, I would think even the biggest idiot out there would kind of want factual information so he doesn't. I mean, most idiots don't believe they're idiots, but there's idiots that don't even want information that shows them they're an idiot because they'd rather believe what they believe is true. The MPD, Minneapolis Police, allows for the use of neck restraint. When this first came out, I went to their policy and showed their policy and said, hey, Chauvin was within policy. He was not violating policy. The PD approved what he did. The PD told every officer in the police department, if you do this, you're within policy. We approve you doing this. We reviewed it, and if you do this, you're within policy. Don't worry about it. And he did it within policy. That's a problem when you try to convict somebody of a crime, especially a cop. The officers recorded on their body cams George suffering EDS, is what we'll call it, excited delirium syndrome. Okay? EDS. A condition which MPD, the police department, considers an extreme threat to both officers and the suspect. The white paper used by MPD, and here's the white paper. If you Google white paper report, it will come up. It's a, how many pages? 22-page report. And it goes into a lot of stuff, and I read it. And to me, excited delirium is the same as what we used to be taught about PCP. Your suspect is going to be uncontrollable. He's going to have blank stares. He's going to have super strength. He's not going to feel pain. He's going to be sweaty. His respiration is going to be high. He's not going to listen to commands. He's going to not know where he's at. Everything that we used to be taught PCP, that's pretty much they're calling EDS now. And in this report, they go through on how many people die and what causes their death. Pain tolerance, sweating, all these issues. Mirror and glass attraction. When we were taught on people on PCP, it was water. Anything that reflected their transmission. I tell a crazy cop story where a guy had no fingers. They found him in the shower, dead. And he had tried to climb down the drain, and he literally scratched. They found scratch marks. He scratched to his fingers down to like the first or second joint, rubbed them raw, trying to climb down this drain, and ended up killing himself when he actually put his head in there and caused it to drain up and back up from all the fluid and blood. And he ended up drowning in the shower, and it was kind of like one of those cases that's like, how did this guy die, man? That's kind of odd. We found him in the shower, and there's blood, and his fingers are gone. Did somebody do this? They cut, and it was determined that he was on PCP, and he tried to climb down the drain. He was trying to dig a hole because they were attracted to water. Now they're saying this EDM is glass attraction and mirror, which to me is a lot like water. But that's just my opinion. I'm not saying the paper concluded this. So they're doing training on this. The white paper was a long thing. There was a lot of doctors. I thought they showed all the doctors that were in here. So all these doctors and MDs did this report over a long period of time. They're giving police training on this. This police department had training on it. They go over the features, evidence, struggle, superhuman strength, all the things, obesity, prior heart problems, collapse, respiratory arrest. I mean, it sounds like George Floyd had classic EDS, and it was brought on and complicated by his methamphetamine, fentanyl, and all the other drugs and alcohol he had in his system, and his lifelong cardiac arrest, hypertension, high blood pressure. I mean, he was perfect to die. And when I say perfect, I'm not saying he should have died. I'm saying with EDS, he is the perfect example on how people die from this. Not by cops with a knee on the neck, which makes the case harder to prove. I'm not saying Chauvin is innocent and Floyd's should have died. Stop with your freaking race-baiting crap. I'm saying there's huge amounts of evidence that is defensible for why you can't charge cops. Remember, when you charge somebody with a crime, you have to prove that they intended to do that crime beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, you can get out of reasonable doubt just by having an alibi. So this white paper is basically Chauvin's alibi. Look, you can't prove he tried to kill him. This guy was likely to die anyway. In this report, there's people that died 4 days later in jail. There's incidents to where cops did exactly the right thing, and the guy still died. And, I mean, unfortunately, most people aren't going to read this. I'm sure this document will be part of the jury evidence because they're going to mention this report. The defense is going to mention it, and they're going to have the copy, and it's going to be read into evidence. So this report is going to be part of Chauvin's defense. I can almost guarantee it. So we talked about that. We talked about, now here's the officers. Remember, we're back on the 6 things that this guy thinks. Number 3. The officers recorded their body cams assessing George Floyd suffering from EDS and the white paper. 4. Restraining the suspect on his stomach in a prone position is a common tactic for EDS. In the white paper, it says putting him on their stomach is the best way to restrain them. They won't hurt themselves. Now, if they're not fighting, you can turn them on their side and hog tie them, which a lot of agencies have done. I called it hobbling. I did a video on hobbling. Maybe YouTube took it down because it was too... Some agencies don't allow hobbling. Hobbling is basically putting a rope around their ankles and then you wrap that rope between their handcuffs. And it puts them in, it looks like, it's called a hog tie for a common term because you're connecting their feet and their hands. And that way they can't kick, they can't fight, they can't stand up, they can't run. It's safer for them and it's safer for officers. The problem was that if you put it on somebody and you don't monitor them, you can cause them to die. People have died when you hog tie them after they fought because if they're overweight, they can't breathe. Because when you put them on their stomach and they're fighting and they're trying to get oxygen and now you hog tie them, it restricts the lungs' ability to expand in the rib cage, so therefore they die because they can't get oxygen. So that's why they have to be monitored when you hog tie them. But we hog tie people all the time. I carried a hobble every day I worked as a cop, and I used it, I don't know, maybe once a week, at least 2 or 3 times a month, and it was very effective. Restraining a suspect in a prone position on a white paper was used and instruct officers to control the suspects until paramedics arrive. Matter of fact, one of the officers said, I think he's got excited delirium. And the other guy goes, I know, that's why he's on his stomach. So it appears that not only were the officers aware of EDS, they suspected it and they followed policy per their department on how to handle suspects with EDS. You put them on their stomach and you control them until the paramedics get there. Number 5, flawed autopsy, potential lethal drugs, concoction, that's combinations, polydrug use, whatever you want to call it, of fentanyl and also methamphetamines. And I think he possessed methamphetamine, tried to hide that when he was fighting with them. Together with the history of drug abuse and 2 serious heart conditions, Floyd's condition was exceptionally and unusually fragile, meaning he was the perfect candidate to die if you use drugs when you know you have heart conditions and you fight with the police and the police restrain you. Your odds of dying increase significantly. But Rick, he should have died because the officer was white and he was black. Well, that's the merited narrative bullshit. That has nothing to do with legal. That has to do with emotion and stirring up hate and riots. Chauvin's neck restraint is unlikely to have exerted dangerous amounts of force on Floyd's neck. Floyd is shown to be able to lift his head, and I remember Floyd lifted his head when he was on his back. And his neck, and Robertson sturdy on his knee, restrained, medium. Okay, he goes into that more later on. Let's be clear, Chauvin and the officers were absolutely wrong. Why were they wrong? I mean, somehow it seems if you say the officers weren't wrong, you're racist and you think George Floyd should have died. I don't think the officers were wrong. And I don't think I'm racist, and I don't think George Floyd should have died. But that's what everyone will say if you say that. The officers were working within their ability and within policy to control a suspect who was committing a felony, who was under the influence of drugs, who had superhuman strength, who was fighting them and resisting them, and they used approved departmental policy to detain him until the ambulance responded. That's going to be said during a trial, I guarantee you. And that's a fact. You can't dispute those facts. You can dispute how much force was on the knee, whether they wanted to kill him, whether they said the bad N-word or some other word, whether in their heart, I just know they wanted him to die because they didn't like black people. You can say whatever you want. The fact is, they were within policy. They knew about excited delirium, and they were doing what the department told them to do was the best thing to do when you experience these suspects who are fighting with EDS. They did not know about his heart conditions, and there's no way, it's not reasonable for them to know. And even if they did know, let's say they did know that he had heart problems, would they have done it differently? My answer is probably not, because they were within policy. Policy doesn't say if somebody's got excited delirium and you know they have a heart problem, you have to just let them go. If that was the policy, then you could hold them accountable. Policy doesn't say that. Policy said if you're dealing with excited delirium, you put them on their stomach and hold them till the paramedics can get there and they can give them a shot of, I think, carotene or whatever the drug is that's supposedly used. But even when they give them the shot, people have died. So, I mean, this guy's case is really, really strong. I don't know if it's as strong as the Rashad case, but both of these charges, because they were charged because of color and outrage and not because of law, both have a really high probability of failing in the court system. So I'm going to give everybody a warning right now. If you don't have guns and ammo before these 2 officers go to court, you're even a bigger fool than I thought. You're probably not here. But anyway, let's move on. like I said, this article, this guy does a great job in this article. While the officers may still be found guilty of manslaughter, the probability of a guilty verdict for murder is low. It's not low, it's damn slim. And, I mean, it's almost none, but we'll see. Trying the case will not be easy. A lot of people have said that. Here he breaks it down more. George Floyd's symptoms well stated before the restraint. The original government complaint said he was falling to ground he couldn't believe. Remember when he first went up to the car, he fell to the ground before he got in the car, and I was like, I wonder if he's resisting. And it seems like, and remember, the government has not let us see the full body cam. They only want to push their agenda. There is full body cam footage of this, and that the government is hiding it from the public. Well, why is that, Rick? Well, they're trying to protect you. That's what it is. Because when government hides things from the public, it's always for your protection. It's not for their protection and their lies and their agenda. Mr. Floyd stiffened up, fell to the ground. Mr. Floyd was not voluntary. He was intentionally falling down, saying he was not going to get in the car and refused to stand. While standing outside the car, Mr. Floyd began repeating that he could not breathe. So I think this is from excerpts of the government's complaint. From the 911 transcripts, and if you can go to these links, which is really why I like this. You can view the government link here. They did a source and they gave you the document. When they reference a document, this used to be journalism. When you reference a document, you include the document so people can click on it and read it for themselves. See, the New York Slimes and the Crime News Network, CNN, they don't give you any documents because they get to cherry pick the document that supports their agenda, and they tell you they got it from the document. A good reporter will give you the document so you can read what happened before and what happened after, so you can get context of what's being said instead of being spoon-fed the liberal agenda lies. So if you want to read the transcripts, you can. In the 911 transcripts, said he was acting drunk, not in control of himself. Someone comes in the store, gives us fake bills. We realize that he left the store, ran back outside. They were sitting in the car. He was sitting in the car. He was awfully drunk, and he was not in control of himself. He was not acting right. Not acting right. That means under the influence, superhuman strength, talking crazy, possibly having mental illness, possibly having polydrug use, possibly being under the influence of drugs. So all those things are not good when you're fighting with the cops. Not acting right. Number 2, Minneapolis Police Department policy authorizing neck restraint. I did it. He didn't put a link to the policy. I wish he would have done that. But I showed the link in my video so you can go to it. Verbal reflection basically covers a policy, and it says the MPD allows to use force against people, and there are 2 types of neck restraints and putting the knee on the ground. Let's see. The officers made several attempts to get Floyd in the backseat of the car. Floyd did not voluntarily get in the car, a struggle, and intentionally falling down, saying he was not going in the car. While standing outside the club, Floyd began repeating, saying he could not breathe, which is a common thing for a lot of criminals, because as soon as they start losing, they say they don't breathe. And a lot of criminals use that as an attempt to get the cops to lighten up in fear of killing them, so they let go, and then they immediately can breathe and get superhuman strength, fight and get away from the cops, or get their gun, or grab their taser and run away. It wouldn't surprise me if Rashad, during his encounter, yelled that he couldn't breathe before he fought. But I didn't hear it in the video, but we don't get to see everything. Mr. Floyd's passenger and squad. The 3 officers weren't able to keep him in the patrol car. Now remember, when I did that video, I was like, how the hell did he get on the other side of the ground? They're putting him on the patrol car on the driver's side of the car, and now all of a sudden 3 cops are on him on the passenger side of the car. Well, this reporter, this journalist, put a link to a video that the media is not showing, the government's not showing, and all this is on the officers' body cams that the government is not showing. And even this video is cut and not played in full. Why is it cut? Well, their body cam videos should show. Most of you probably haven't seen this. I hadn't seen this till I read the article. Didn't know it was out there. So, you see him struggling in the car. You see this guy over here trying to get him in. Now remember, Floyd was tall, 6'2" or something. So, for those people that were educated by a liberal college, A car isn't 6 foot long, so if your feet are out and your head's forward and your arms are fighting, you're not going to be able to close the doors with a 6-foot person lying in the back seat in most cars. So they're trying to get him in a car. This guy's trying to pull him in because he's fighting to get in. This guy's trying to push him in so he shut the door. And this cop that got fired is watching and videotaping, and we're not getting released and we're not being allowed to see this videotape. Why, Rick? Because they're protecting us, of course. So at this point, he either jumps out or he grabs the officer or he pulls him out. This officer immediately runs over. And that is how they end up on the other side of the car. Everybody was wondering how they end up on the other side of the car. That's how. Remember, all this is on video footage that the government is withholding from us. Shocking. Okay, continuing with this report, Mr. Floyd was on the passenger side of the car. Mr. Floyd went to the ground face down with still handcuffs. The 3 officers were unable to keep him in the police car. The little video evidence the defendant pulled Floyd out of the car. Let's see, a longer video posted here. And that was the same video. So, let's see. Floyd, however, the government, who has access to the body cams, is a crucial point, did not write this in their complaint. So what they're saying is Sean King indicates a struggle. Sean King believes this video shows the officer beating Floyd. However, the government who accessed the body cam did not write that. So somebody thinks that when they pulled him through the car, they were beating on him. If it showed the cops beating on him in a car, I guarantee you we would have seen those body cams. Because our crooked left-wing government pushing their agenda that would help them push their agenda. Because we did not see the body cam, I guarantee you that is not on the body cam. Okay, active resistance. Minneapolis is refusing to release the officer's body cam. This information is important for determining how Floyd died. Of course it is. And the fact they're not releasing it makes them culpable for all the damages. But what do they care? They're the government. They're not paying for anything. They're just going to raise taxes and say we need more bigger budgets to fix everything. Number 3, the officers readily determined George Floyd was suffering from excited. The white paper. I gave you a link to that. He didn't link it. I wish he would have. MBT published a report saying this ketamine, I don't know if I'm saying it right. I don't really care. I'll just call it K-mine. Is for excited delirium. That's how. I think there's another video I'm going to do where a white guy was put on the ground. Ambulance came up and shot him with that, and he died almost instantly on the ground. Or he was already dead when he shot him in the arm with it. Pretty disturbing, but you're not going to hear about it because it was white officers and white suspect. But I'm going to do a video on it. It's in my to-do list. EDS, police officers should consider when dealing with him. Officer Lane, I'm worried about a cytolithrin. That's why we have him on his stomach. That was heard. Here's the symptoms of EDS. All these are in the white papers. All these happen pretty much with everybody that fights with cops. If you fight with a cop, you're going to experience every one of these. Okay? The white papers describe giving irrationally, potentially violent, dangerous, lethal EDS subject LEO interaction. Potentially lethal medical syndrome. This already challenged. LEOs known to be irrational. All right. So if you want to read out, neck restraint is common for EDS. Suspects have died from all kind of restraints. This gets into, hey, even if you don't use neck restraint, suspects die. Even if you use different restraints, a suspect die. So for the prosecution to say Floyd died because of the neck restraint is not only crazy, the physical examination of his neck shows no bruising or injury. So the only way the neck killed him works is in the left-wing media and DA charging, saying that's what we think and that's what we're going to charge, that's what we're going to have a jury, and please stop burning down our cities because we agree with you, the neck killed him. Even though everybody knows with a brain or anybody with a legal mind says there ain't no way in hell we're going to be able to prove this. These guys are going to walk. But you know what? Let's just say it now if it stops the riots, and that'll give us a year or two for the trial. And then when we lose the trial, we'll blame it on systemic racism in the criminal justice system, and we'll get more mileage out of that, even though we charged it knowing it's bullshit and ain't never going to fly. All right, You can make your own decision. This is my opinion, people. Number 4, encounters. This is where other people have died. So this guy was a sheriff deputy who died of EDS. While celebrating his birthday, he began to display agitated, unusable behavior. When officers arrived at the scene, many of them, his colleagues, did not recognize him and assumed fighting stance. The responding officer suspected ED. The officers handcuffed him, forced him into a seated position because they didn't want to put him on the ground, put their knee on the neck. Yeah, that's because he's a cop, Rick, and they were just protecting him, and see, they wanted to kill. No, this means there's no reason to believe that seating a person in a different position saves him. Moments later, he experienced trouble breathing, cardiac arrest, died 2 days later. And they didn't put a knee on the neck. So if a guy's dying 2 days later with no... Well, Rick, that's why he died so soon. It was a knee on the... No, that's just BS. You're reaching. Another case. 65 years old. Police were called to the residence after coming outside with a pipe in his hand, pulling a knife out of his pocket. Police decided to pat him down. The police handcuffed him, began patting him down. He began experiencing extreme emotional distress. The police tried to de-escalate verbally. Then they tried keeping the suspect on his back, which did not work. They momentarily placed him in a prone position, even engaged in a neck restraint for less than a minute. Everybody's like, he kept his knee on him for 8 minutes. It killed him. Well, you're going to get down here in a minute about weight of the knee and how it really didn't kill him. But it sounds good and it makes everybody happy because that's what they want to believe. The police were calm the entire time on this call. One officer tells the other officer, just keep holding him down. He keeps trying to roll over. He's going to hurt himself. The police eventually place him on the side in a recovery position, which is a candidate for a safe restraint position for EDS encounters. They hold his head in their palms to prevent him from banging on the ground. Again, these officers tried something different. Guess what? Roy Scott video linked above. Best case recorded. Everything they did was correct. They went above and beyond, de-escalating. The officers had compassion for Roy Scott. Roy Scott still died. Dead. These cases, and the more there are, there's a lot of them, are all going to be in defense that there's no way, government, you can prove, and the government should be held accountable. Not because I want the cops, not because I want dirty or guilty cops to get off. I don't like guilty people getting off. But the system has to be able to prove the case. Otherwise, they will arrest people because of public pressure and because of their color and get convictions and ruin lives. Government has to be held accountable at all aspects. No matter how much you want somebody convicted, government needs to be held accountable. They have to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. They have to convince 12 jurors that this is true, what we're saying. Government doesn't have to do that when they do press releases. Government doesn't have to do that when YouTube is censoring anything that goes against government, and they only put things that are pro-government and pro what they want their agenda to be. Now, let's go on. More cases of note. It takes 4 officers to restrain until EMT can get there with their ketamine solution to shoot them. And people still die even if they give them the drug, the best drug for EDS. And even if when they give it to them, people still die. Look, George Floyd was a perfect candidate for dying, heart disease, multiple drugs. See, it used to be, when I was growing up and when I first got into law enforcement work, if you went out and got drunk and did something stupid, you had no defense because you voluntarily went out and got drunk and put yourselves in a position so you couldn't claim. They're claiming George Floyd has no responsibility in what happened here. He went out and used drugs. He knew he had cardiac conditions. He knew he had heart conditions. He knew all this. He still put drugs and he fought with the cops. And none of this is being put on George Floyd. And people who used to get drunk used to say, well, I was sorry I was drunk. I didn't know. Okay, well, if you didn't know, we can't really prove you meant to do it, so we'll let you off. No! You knew when you took alcohol that would make you not responsible, and you can't claim no responsibility just because you drank alcohol. No more than George Floyd should be able to claim complete non-responsibility for these actions when he knew he had heart conditions. He knew he was a convicted felon. He knew he was committing a crime. He knew he was in possession of methamphetamine. He knew he had methamphetamine and fentanyl in his system. He knew he fighting with the cops wasn't a good idea. No, he didn't. The drugs made him do it. Okay, well, if you want to claim the devil made me do it defense or the drugs made me defense, go ahead. but you shouldn't start putting other people in jail just because you don't like the color of their skin. That's BS. All right, what we got here? The 11th Circuit, unreasonable, handcuffed, his legs shackled. Most officers testified that Lewis was not a danger to himself, merely arrested, agitated, uncooperative, based on a refusal to sit upright. There's a link to that. I think I might have went to it. Yeah. In this case, is basically just saying hobbling is okay. And cops maintain their immunity if they're within policy. In this case, in the case study, a 37-year-old male experienced excited delirium, died in county jail 4 days after being taken into custody. This was pretty interesting. They did a survey and they wanted people to share their experiences, and they said these are the top 2 responses. From a standpoint of EMS, the best method I've seen is to have a bunch of cops hold him down until I get there with the ketamine filled syringe. It's the safest method. These people are having a medical problem and they are going to need a hospital before jail. The non-lethal tools of law enforcement rarely work on someone truly experiencing excited delirium. Strength, 3 cops and a knee, and medication is really what they need and will work on them. Well, this guy will probably be testified in this trial. Yep, right on point. It just sucks. It takes 10 to 20 minutes for the stuff to start working. Crazy exhaustion for everybody involved. I hate going to these encounters because of how physical it can be. The cops were tired. They were trying to hold him down. They fought with him. If you can get lucky with the medics on scene and able to hold him down and they can obtain an IV access, it's much faster. But when in doubt, go IM. I think that's intermuscular. I don't know what IN is. Intranasal, maybe? I don't know. George Floyd had potentially lethal amounts of fentanyl. This is really going to be a hard hurdle to get over. His fentanyl was 11, and the fatal dosage of fentanyl is 10. He was above the fatal dosage. The odds of him dying, even if the cops didn't contact him, was high. But not only did he have fatal doses of fentanyl, he had methamphetamine in his system. So, I mean, plus, he had coronary problems. The reason Chauvin's knee to the neck restraint did not exert dangerous amounts forward. Here's where he gets into the force of a knee and how much Chauvin weighed, and his knee was approximately 53 pounds of pressure across his neck, which isn't enough. Here's what they did on double knee, medium, single knee, etc. He went into all this. If Chauvin weighs 156 pounds, each knee would put 90 pounds, or if you put both knees, it would be 90. He had one knee, which would be 45, which is way less than is needed to restrict breathing or blood flow. And again, you're going to have to prove this. It's one thing to say it. It's one thing to even really believe it. It's another thing to prove it. They charge these guys knowing they're not going to get a conviction. And it's bullshit. They've done it before. And when they charged all the guys at Rodney King, they knew it was wrong. Rodney King was on the influence. He was probably excited to learn. He was throwing super restraint. He was tased 3 times, which the media cut out. He had no effect of the tasers. He took the baton from the cops. Did they beat him excessively? Yeah, they used too much force. I think they did. But it was nowhere near what they portrayed, and they went after all these cops, and when all the cops were found innocent, people rioted. Same people who are rioting today. Same reason to loot, kill, steal. And they're heroes. And we should tear down statues. And we should change our whole country. Because few percentage of the population wants to loot and kill under a false narrative. The conclusion of studies are not enough to exonerate. No, they're not. But they're damn sure enough to create reasonable doubt. Any doubt is reasonable. The state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. That's almost certainty. That's why it's easy to get a conviction in civil and you can't get a criminal conviction. But anyway, New York Times, here's an interesting note that he put on here. New York Times left out all this shit. They played and pushed their agenda, their black riot race baiting shit. And the New York Times showed Floyd being cuffed in the back, but they cut out the footage so you couldn't see the struggle before him getting cuffed. New York Times mentioned complaints against the officers. However, the New York Times did not mention that of these complaints, only one was found merited against Chauvin. One complaint. And it was when he asked a woman who was speeding 10 miles over limit to step out of the car. And they said that wasn't justified. He shouldn't have had her step out of the car. That's the only complaint against Chauvin. But if you listen to all these people, he had 18 complaints in 19 years. He should have been fired. He should have never been working. They should have fired him and put him in jail. He only had one sustained complaint, and it wasn't racial, and it wasn't using force. It was making a woman step out of her car on a traffic stop. That was the only sustained complaint against the guy. If you didn't know this, you would think Chauvin had 18 years of beating up people and using force, and the cops didn't do nothing, and now he killed a poor black man, and it was his fault. I mean, it's just crazy. They also omit the average number of complaints against officers, which is 1 every 3 years. If that's 1 every 3 years, I'm shocked. I know officers that get 5 or 10 complaints, not a day, but easy 5 or 10 a year. And that's nothing. If you're working 365 days a year, and let's say you got 30 days vacation, we'll knock that down. Let's say 300 days a year you're working. And out of those 300 days, you arrest maybe one guy a day, which is pretty easy. I mean, it's almost impossible not to go and arrest one guy a day. So out of 300 people you arrest, 50% are going to complain, if not 75, if not 90% are going to complain. So for them to say that 3 years, one, I don't know where the hell they got that stat, but that seems awful low to me. The New York Times also admitted that Chauvin had obtained 2 Medals of Valor. Amazing that nobody knows Chauvin had 2 Medals of Valor. No, Ricky had his knee and he killed him and it was his fault. It had nothing to do with the fentanyl and methamphetamine and the drug abuse and the excited and the fighting with the cops, and he was committing a crime and he was a parolee and had nothing to do with any of that, Rick. Nothing. You're just taking the white cop's side. Okay, whatever. Freaking idiots. I mean, how can you even listen to yourself and think that's true? New York Times says, we don't know why they pull Floyd out of the car. This is misleading. We do know because you saw he was fighting and they couldn't get the door shut. And they have body cam footage. I don't know if New York Times see it. New York Times omitted that Floyd was able to lift his head and the neck, because when you see the video, he is lifting his head and neck. And if Chauvin had his knee on his neck and was exerting so much force, he could not have lifted his neck. Going to be a problem for the prosecution. New York Times omitted completely that the officers believed he was suffering from EDS. This is not a joke. The New York Times omitted it. New York Times ignores the history of the drug use and the 2 heart conditions and the fentanyl found in Mr. Floyd's system. I thought this was a great article. Again, if you want to read it, it's really got some good information. Medium.com, that's the name of it. I thought this was interesting. I don't know if YouTube will leave it up because, again, it doesn't push their agenda. But if it doesn't leave it up, I'll do a follow-up and repost it on Bitchute. So I think it's good information. I always think more information is better than less. I think people should be able to make educated decisions and not be freaking sheep and told what to think and what they need to believe and what they shouldn't see and what they shouldn't hear, unlike the gods of the internet, Twitter, YouTube, Google, Facebook, who thinks they should only be able to tell you what you should hear and what you should consider. And you should only listen to them, and we'll protect you from everything that we don't want you to hear. All right, we'll end that there on why this prosecution is not going to go well.